After a nearly 7-month hiatus prompted by the Supreme Court's review of a Kentucky case challenging the lethal injection method of execution as unconstitutional, the Texas death machine cranked back up in June. While serious questions remain about Texas's application of the trichemical lethal injection cocktail, the wheels of death continue to turn. Currently, 13 Texas inmates are scheduled for execution through November. More could be added, or, depending on legal filings, some may be postponed or removed from the list. Here's a closer look at several of those cases. Leon Dorsey is scheduled for execution on August 12th. He was 18 years old and had no prior prison record on April 4th, 1994, when he robbed a Dallas video store and killed 2 employees. He lifted a total of $392. With the aid of an accomplice, Dorsey subsequently committed a second offense, killing a 51-year-old woman in a local food mart. Michael Rodriguez is scheduled to die on August 14th. Rodriguez was one of the so-called Texas 7 that escaped from prison on December 24, 2000. The men robbed a sporting goods store at gunpoint and ultimately killed Irving police officer Aubrey Hawkins. Rodriguez and 2 others were sentenced to die for the crime. Dennard Mans is scheduled for execution on August 20th. Mans had 2 previous convictions in New York for armed robbery and had just been paroled when on November 18, 1998, he broke into the Killeen home of 26-year-old Army Specialist Michelle Robson. He stole her credit cards, cash, her car, sexually assaulted her, and shot her 5 times with a .22. He was picked up on a weapons charge and was charged with Robson's murder after the gun was forensically linked to the crime. Mans claimed he was falsely accused, and he indicated that the crime, in fact, was committed by a relative. Additional evidence at the scene was linked to Mans, however, and his appeals were denied. Gregory Wright is scheduled to die on September 9th. Wright was convicted and sentenced to death for the 1997 robbery and stabbing murder of Donna Vick, a Dallas woman who reportedly provided assistance to homeless persons in her neighborhood. In fact, Wright had lived in Vick's home for at least a week prior to her murder. The state says that after smoking crack cocaine, Wright murdered Vick while another man, John Wade Adams, was present. Prosecutors submitted as evidence a bloody pair of blue jeans that they allege Wright had been wearing when he straddled Vick's body and stabbed her. Wright has maintained his innocence. Indeed, Adams confessed to committing the crime alone on at least 3 separate occasions, and the results of DNA testing performed last year excluded Wright as a contributor to DNA found on the murder knife and found that his DNA profile was inconsistent with the biological material that were found on the bloody jeans. Still, the courts have so far denied his appeals. William Murray is scheduled to die on September 17th. Murray was 30 years old in February 1998 when he beat, strangled, and raped 93-year-old Rena Radcliffe in her home in Kaufman, just east of Dallas, where she lived alone. He stole change from a glass jar and a small knife, he later told police. Reportedly, Murray later told his mom that he had killed Radcliffe while in a drug-induced frenzy. Advocates for Murray questioned his competency to be executed after he said he would waive his appeals, a decision he later withdrew and said was prompted by depression and suicidal thoughts. Joseph Rees is scheduled to be executed on September 18th. Rees was 19 when he and an accomplice, Christopher White, broke into the Cumbie, Texas home of a 64-year-old man and shot him with a .22. They took his car and other property that they later tried to pawn. Kevin Watts is scheduled to die on October 16th. Watts says that he had been on a binge and was suffering from a drug-induced psychosis when he walked into the Sam Juan Garden restaurant in San Antonio and shot 3 employees in the back of the head. He kidnapped a 4th victim, the recent bride of one of the other employees, and sexually assaulted her before taking her to a friend's house to allow him to rape her. She lived and later testified at his trial. Eric Nano is scheduled to die on October 28th. Nano was tried and convicted for the March 1995 rape and murder in Houston of 7-year-old Nicole Benton. Police found Benton's body in Nano's attic after neighbors told investigators that he had previously been accused of fondling a neighborhood child. But whether Nano's case has been carefully vetted by the courts is unclear. His appointed attorney, Sid Crowley, is one of a handful of lawyers that has been identified as having provided substandard, if not plainly incompetent, legal representation to indigent death row defendants. Indeed, in 2000, Crowley told the Court of Criminal Appeals, which administers the list of court-appointed lawyers deemed capable of handling such appeals, that he didn't understand habeas law. Still, reportedly, Crowley remains on the CCA's list of eligible attorneys. Elke Taylor is scheduled for execution on November 6th. Taylor was convicted of the robbery murder of 64-year-old Otis Flake in Tarrant County. Taylor and an accomplice reportedly stole dishes and pots and pans from Flake's house, which they later sold for $16. Taylor has been mentally impaired his entire life, say his family and supporters. He dropped out of school at 15 when he was unable to complete the 6th grade and reads and writes at only a 1st grade level. It is unconstitutional to execute the mentally retarded, and Taylor's supporters say that his mental impairment is such that he should be rendered ineligible for death. When Taylor was 10, his IQ was scored at 75, which is just above the commonly accepted threshold for mental retardation. But experts argue that his score was based on an outdated test and that his true IQ falls somewhere in the mid to upper 60s. And they argue that state officials have cherry-picked among Taylor's various test scores in order to conclude that he is not too impaired to die. At least one state expert concluded that Taylor could have performed better on intelligence tests had he tried to do so. This is Jordan Smith for the Austin Chronicle.